today is January the 7th, 2024. I think it's the 7th, it might be the 8th. And I'm Yuri. I host this YouTube channel, the Ogham Grove, and also the Facebook group, the Ogham Grove. And I thought it would be good to do some short videos, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes each, explaining the basics, Ogham for beginners, if you like, because I realize that with some of the Zoom sessions we're doing now, they're getting quite complicated and esoteric. I think the rain's coming. I'm outside in a park in Cornwall in the town of Falmouth, and we'll just see how it goes. Hopefully my laptop doesn't get too wet. So anyway, Ogham for beginners, Ogham basics, if you like. So a quick introduction because of the oncoming rain. The word Ogham is spelt O-G-H-A-M, and it's a common mistake. Lots of people say Ogham, and it's not. The G is silent. So I guess lesson one with the Ogham is how to pronounce it. You know, the no G, Ogham. Now it's an Irish word. It's a Gaelic word, and the G is silent, like garden gnome. And the Irish language is fascinating in itself. Maybe that's a different topic. So the Ogham is an old or even primitive Irish alphabet. And many people are drawn to it these days because they want to use it in a way similar to how people use the Anglo-Saxon runes, have a pouch of runes and do a rune reading, or have a pouch of twigs of the Ogham trees and do a reading with the Ogham. And that's perfectly valid, but it's much, much more than that. And we'll address what it is and how it can be used in future videos. So just for beginners then, the Ogham is an alphabet of 20 letters. And it was the earliest evidence we have of it being used are inscribed on ancient stones, like standing stones, but they're not Bronze Age. They're from the 4th century onwards. And so they're called pillar stones. And they date to the 3rd or 4th century. And there's over 300 of them in Ireland. And they have written inscriptions upon them, written in the Ogham alphabet. Irish, the language changed over the centuries, and it's quite interesting how it changed. But initially, the Ogham was used on these pillar stones in a very simple way, kind of to remember somebody who maybe had died. So it's like, here lies so-and-so, son of so-and-so. Or it's a land claim. So it might be claiming this territory belongs to such and such a person. So they're very simple messages. And they're written in what's called primitive Irish. And no one really knows how to pronounce the words in the inscriptions of primitive Irish. It's so long ago. There are scholarly ideas, intellectual guesses, but, like Shakespearean English compared to modern English is barely 500 years, and it's quite difficult for a lot of people to read. And if you go further back to Chaucer or medieval writings, or even Beowulf in the old Anglo-Saxon, it's so different. So modern Irish compared to primitive Irish, it's like 1500 years. So it can be translated, but how to pronounce doesn't really matter. We're looking at an alphabet in a pouch to use for runes, to use as runes or oghams to reading. Now, that's the archaeological evidence, these pillar stones, 300 or so in Ireland. There's maybe 30 in Scotland. There's about 30 in Wales. There's 4 or 5 in Cornwall. So the Irish took the Ogham across the Irish Sea with their sea trade and established the Ogham in the mainland British Isles. But it changed then, so in Scotland, the land of the Picts, the Ogham survived until the 8th century. And it's used by the Picts, who are not Irish, but they learnt the Ogham writing system and they intermarried with the Irish settlers. But there are wonderful Pictish stones with Ogham inscriptions, but the inscriptions are not writing anything Gaelic. They're writing Pictish words, but with an Irish alphabet. So that's confusing. A lot of these stones can't even be deciphered. And then in Wales, there are stones that are called bilingual because the 5th century, 4th century Britons had been Romanized and they used the Latin alphabet. And so there are bilingual stones in Wales and Cornwall that have Ogham and Latin written on them. And they say the same thing. So it says what it says in Irish and it says what it says in British, but with the Latin alphabet. And Ogham survived in Ireland until around about the 6th or 7th century. It fell out of favor with the coming of Christianity because the early Irish church used Latin. So because Latin was the alphabet of Christianity, Ogham fell aside. And a lot of the old pillar stones with Ogham inscriptions were then reused as to build doorways in churches. Church windows were just turned upside down as something pagan and of the past. That's something we can go into too. I'm just trying to keep this simple for beginners. So the Ogham alphabet has 20 letters. In the original stones that survived, theoretically, it was carved into wooden wands, wooden tablets, but none of that has survived. Only the old stones have survived so far. Maybe one day someone will find Ogham on an old piece of wood in an old bog somewhere. It could happen, but we've only got the 4th century stones at the moment. Then you jump forwards nearly 1,000 years to 1390 AD, 1390 AD. And there's a book in Ireland called in English, the Book of Ballymote. And that's the first written evidence of the Ogham, explaining in a passage called the Oracept na Nices, or the Scholar's Primer, that each letter of the Ogham represented a tree. So the first letter B is the birch tree, and the second letter L is the rowan tree. And then you have the alder tree and the willow tree and so on. So it's an alphabet of 20 trees. And that's fascinating in itself. Some people call it the Druid tree alphabet. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about that. I'll address that in future videos for beginners. But once you're at the medieval days, 14th century, 5 more letters are added. They're known as the forfeda, the extra 5 letters. So some people use 25 Ogham, but originally there were just 20. And the forfeda look different. We'll look at that in another video. And then a strange thing happened after the medieval times. The medieval Irish is known as Old Irish. So that's a bit more decipherable, a bit more understandable, a bit like Shakespearean English to modern English. So the 4th century primitive Irish, difficult to translate, difficult to pronounce. It's guesswork. Medieval Old Irish is from the 14th century and uses 25 Ogham letters. And then a strange thing happened in the modern day Irish uses the Latin alphabet that the English language uses, but they only use 18 letters of the alphabet, the modern alphabet. So English Latin alphabet has 26 letters, but the Irish, the Gaelic, only uses 18 of those, which makes it very difficult for English people to read and pronounce Gaelic writing, Irish writing, because we don't know the rules. We don't know how the consonants mix together to make different sounds. So that's quite difficult for English-speaking people to get a grasp on the Irish Gaelic. But it's interesting, I think, that primitive Irish had a 20-letter alphabet. Old Irish had 25 letters in their alphabet. And yet modern Irish only needs 18 letters. It's a really interesting idea. So it just shows how language is always changing. And we'll look at some of those ideas in this thing for beginners too. So this has just been the basic introduction, tell you what I'm planning, 10, 15-minute videos on all the information for beginners. And this one, lesson 1, was just about how to pronounce Ogham, not Ogham, but Ogham. And that some people use 20 letters because of the primitive. Some people use 25 letters because of the medieval. And yeah, if you were totally 21st century, you could strip it down to 18 Latin letters, but that doesn't have the romance of the 20 or 25 trees as well. So right now we're in the days of birch. Birch is the first letter of the Ogham alphabet. Here's one of my pieces of birch. And it says at the bottom, beath, beath. Beath is just the Gaelic or Celtic word for the birch tree. The birch tree is the first letter of the Ogham alphabet. And we're in the days of birch now until, I think, the 16th of January, then we enter the days of rowan. I'll explain the year wheel soon, maybe in the next video. I came into this because I love whittling. Here's another piece of birch that has yet to be decorated. So I was drawn to the Ogham because I'm interested in tree lore more than alphabets. But I'm also a mystic and occultist, artist, and I'm interested in symbolism. So for now, for over 15, 20 years, I've been studying tree lore and symbolism and Celtic mythology, and all of that gets combined into the Ogham Grove studies. If you're new to this, go on YouTube to the Ogham Grove YouTube channel. We have already spent 3 years going around the year wheel of the Ogham. If you want basic information, you can Google in YouTube, search in YouTube for the birch tree 2022. 2022 was basic information. So you can put oak tree 2022 or holly tree 2022 or blackthorn tree 2022. You'll get all the basic information of each tree of the Ogham. And the following year, 2023, we did herbalism. So we got quite into all of the medicine you can get from the birch tree, the rowan tree, and so on. And then last year, we got really quite esoteric. And we were looking at which Celtic gods and goddesses best correspond with each tree. The theory is that you can use the Ogham as a sacred circle, as a grove for doing your spirituality, your magic. And it's an internal grove too. So you can meditate and go to your Ogham grove, and each tree of your Ogham grove represents a god or goddess. So you can go to your place of meditation and be surrounded by a pantheon of 20 gods and goddesses or more. So that's really quite rich and complicated and pregnant with potential and inspiration. It's a fascinating journey. The beginner's journey is to learn the basics. The beginner's journey is to get a pouch of 20 twigs and use them for readings. You know, pull a twig out of a pouch, say it's an oak twig. What does the oak twig mean? Learn that. What does a holly twig mean? You know, so by gathering twigs, putting them in a pouch, playing with them, reading them, that's the beginning of the journey. And a reality check. It took the Druids over 20 years to learn how to be Druids, you know, 20 years in the forest. So learning the 20 trees of the Ogham is a good beginning. And it's a long journey. It's a lifestyle, you know, it's a life journey, building a relationship with the natural world, the trees, the gods and goddesses that resonate with those trees, the elemental fairy spirits that resonate with sacred landscape. And then traveling in your psyche to the spirit world, to Anu, to Avalon, to the realm of Imbus, to the realm of Arwen, using the Ogham Grove as a gateway to an infinite dream world of inspiration. That's the potential, much more than just using 20 twigs to 20 twigs to do rune readings. You know, it's a wonderful, wonderful journey that connects people with Celtic history, Celtic mythology, Celtic landscapes that can then go out into the world, and wherever you are, Australia, Africa, America, Canada, doesn't matter. You use the methods to connect with the land spirits and the trees of wherever you are, being a druid on the planet under the stars. So here's another piece, my walking stick. This is a long piece of blackthorn, and blackthorn is very protective. On it, it says nothing is forgotten. That's partly from an old TV series called Robin of Sherwood, but it's also from Greek philosophy. I think it was Plato. I might be wrong. Can't remember Greek names so well. But from Greek philosophy, probably Plato, was the idea that there is nothing to learn, only to remember. You know, your infinite eternal soul already knows all this stuff. Nothing is forgotten, just time of remembering and reconnecting with ancestral wisdom and the spirits of the land. So here's the beginning of short videos, Ogham for beginners. If you have any questions, doesn't matter how simple they are, put them in the comments below, and that might inspire the next video. And I'll try not to waffle too much. I'll try and keep things really, really basic. Ciao for now.